Mass rally in Cairo's Tahrir Square a day before elections to replace the ousted President Hosni Mubarak. Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood is warning of a threat to democracy after a constitutional court dissolved the country's first democratically elected parliament. So, on the eve of the presidential runoff, Egypt's political future looking very uncertain with a host of competing players. The Supreme Council of the Armed Forces are the generals running the country, and they're pressing on with the vote. There's the Muslim Brotherhood and their candidate, Mohammed Morsi, who says he's ready to compete in this weekend's presidential runoff. And then the former Prime Minister, Ahmed Shafik, who's taking on Morsi in the presidential race, he called Thursday's court verdict a victory for the Egyptian people. And perhaps the most unpredictable are those that call themselves the revolutionaries. They've been on the streets for a year campaigning for change and are expected to be out in force once again today. Okay, let's go across to Cairo now. We can speak to our correspondent, Mike Hanna. And Mike, what's the feeling about how events are likely to unfold today? People beginning to gather in Tahrir Square. Those crowds will swell.
Well, Nick, there's a sense of shell shock, if you want to put it that way, within the Egyptian society. That constitutional court decision, the two decisions, having a massive impact in terms of the what will happen in the days ahead. Now, there are only a few hundred people in Tahrir Square at the moment. The number of protest movements have called for people to gather there in the course of the day. At this stage, though, all very quiet. It does appear that that sense of shock has spread throughout the society, impacting as well on the protest movement as a whole.
The interesting thing is that this court ruling seems to mean that the new president's going to have more powers and less oversight than his predecessor. And you've got to wonder, how did that happen?
Well, to just go back over exactly what this constitutional court decision means. Effectively, what it has said is that Parliament was unconstitutionally elected because 1/3 of the seats in Parliament were filled by party members rather than those with no party affiliation. That means, says the Constitutional Court, that the whole of Parliament is invalid, the lower house of Parliament, that is. Now, that Parliament had the legislative authority. Effectively, what it means now is that legislative authority, the power to make laws, goes back to the executive authority, which is the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, SCAF. So now it is SCAF that has the legislative power as well as the executive power. The question is, with the person who will be elected over the next 2 days, will he inherit all those powers from SCAF? Will SCAF then hand over that executive authority, which will bring with it the legislative authority that SCAF has now taken unto itself? So all a very complicated situation. Lawyers scratching their heads to find out exactly what all of this means, and whoever wins this election is probably asking that same question too, Nick.
Right, and then looking ahead to the voting over the next couple of days, is it possible to say who may benefit the most from what's happened?
Well, that's very difficult to understand. Certainly, among a large sector of the society, this decision by the Constitutional Court has evoked major anger. The decision specifically allowing Ahmed Shafik to run, saying that the disenfranchisement law, which was passed by Parliament, is invalid. Now, that may result in a blowback by those who previously may not have supported the Muslim Brotherhood candidate, may now be galvanized into doing so out of anger at the fact that a man seen as a remnant of the previous regime is standing. However, one must remember that Ahmed Shafik got some 5 million votes in the first round of that election. That support is not going to get away. So his support is clearly substantive, otherwise he wouldn't be in this last round. But it's difficult to see exactly what these constitutional moves, the impact of them on this presidential race. It is still as open in a way as it was before.
All right, Mike, thanks very much indeed. That's Mike Hanna in Cairo.